So, do you lose strength whilst pregnant? This is a question that I get asked quite a lot, but also it was one I was quite interested in knowing myself before I got pregnant. So I thought it'd be ideal to do a little video explaining how things kind of went for me. Um, Also, there's a lot of, it isn't a simple yes or no answer. There are a lot of factors to take into account with it, and whether you keep training at a similar sort of intensity to how you used to, or if you change things, because that is obviously going to affect what you can lift. Not necessarily your actual strength, but the numbers you're putting out there. For me, the first trimester felt like I'd lost strength. I was so ill, I was puking all the time. So obviously, I wasn't as healthy, I wasn't eating well, I wasn't keeping my food down, I wasn't as hydrated, so that is all going to have an effect. The biggest thing I noticed in the first trimester was my explosive power went to absolute shit. Like, I had no explosive power whatsoever, and I didn't really understand it. I was on progesterone at the start of pregnancy, well, from about 7 weeks, just from previous miscarriages. They thought they'd put me on it just in case it was to do with a hormonal issue. It wasn't, but anyway, I had to take that, which I think did make the sickness and the lack of explosive power a lot worse. I didn't really realise what was going on at first. I thought I was just, my cat's behind me, I thought I was just feeling a lot weaker, and then I went to open a door which had like a top hinge bit, and I went to jump up to knock it, and I was nowhere near it, and it's like just a normal height door, like it wasn't even high. I'm probably not far off touching it if I extend my arm out, and I just couldn't jump. And I realised like my explosive power had just absolutely gone. It did start to come back after around 16 weeks or so, and that is when I started to feel more human again in terms of not being quite as sick. I was still sick, and I still get sick at times now, and throughout the full pregnancy, 37 weeks at the moment. So obviously I have good days and bad with that, but my explosive power did seem to come back probably around the 16-week mark. So I was at the stage thinking like, oh, I'm weaker during pregnancy, that is how it is. I was still training just as hard, same sort of intensity. Obviously the weights were lighter, and there's certain exercises I couldn't do, especially in strongman, because certain things starts to hit your belly, which obviously isn't safe. Some of it probably would have been safer for longer than I actually trained it, but it was just like log pressing. I probably could have done for a bit longer with the cleans, because I didn't have a bump for quite a while, but it just didn't feel safe to me. So I did stop that in my first trimester, and stopped anything that had any sort of contact with my belly. But most of my training stayed pretty much the same. I was still doing your sort of main static lifts, pressing from blocks, moving events, some carries, but again started to drop those out after the first trimester. But when I did start to feel less ill, I noticed my strength coming back. Also, I'd taken off my belt at around 10 weeks. Some people do leave it on for longer because, again, like I said, I didn't have a bump, so I could have. But it just didn't feel right to me to be bracing against a belt when I had a baby in my belly. Like, I was worried it would do some sort of damage. It wouldn't have. It probably would have been fine. I've seen people use belts up to 20 weeks. Or you can swap to a soft belt if that feels more comfortable. But for me, it was just my choice to drop it around, I think, 9 or 10 weeks. I stopped wearing my belt. So a lot of my lifts kind of went to shit without a belt. I'd not done enough beltless training in the past, and I knew I needed to, and I needed to work on my brace better, because I think I relied on having my belt far too tight, not actually bracing into it, just using it to sort of almost replace my abs and a strong core, which I did not have. I had a strong core, I just didn't use it well. So pregnancy was, the goal for pregnancy for me was to be able to brace better, build up my sort of core engagement and core strength as well. But like I said, I had a strong core, I just couldn't engage it very well. So all of my lifts felt really weak taking my belt off. Pressing wasn't affected that much. Push press was, but jerks weren't. But I was used to doing those without a belt anyway. But like my deadlifts felt absolutely awful. I had sessions doing like sets of 5 on 100, 110, 120, and it felt the equivalent to what 180 felt in a belt. And I was thinking, I'm never going to be strong again. Like, this is it. Like, I'm kind of done in this sport. But it did come back pretty quickly. I got used to not using the belt, realised my deadlift position was quite off, and I'd just be able to adapt it around having a really tight belt, and that didn't work when I didn't have the belt on. And I think it's one of the reasons why a suit never agreed with me, and I could never really pull well in a suit. So that's my deadlift position is something that's completely changed throughout pregnancy, and I'm not a million miles from where I was pre-pregnancy with that. Pre-pregnancy I pulled 180 without a belt. I've pulled 190 now without a belt, without a hitch, and without straps. With previously it was 180, which was with straps and with a hitch. So you could say I'm technically got stronger. My deadlift was 222.5 pre-pregnancy, so I'm a bit far from that in terms of hitting a 1 rep max. I was hoping to pull 200 because I feel like I had it in me. But various things with the position of the baby ended up changing. So sessions I was going to go for it, it just didn't quite feel right, and I just wasn't able to peak it the way I would have wanted to. But I'm happy with the progression of that. To be able to pull 190 and I was repping 180, I'm really happy, and I feel like I am actually stronger in that. And when I put my belt back on, I feel like I'll probably surpass what my old PB was. So I don't think there's been any sort of like strength loss. And at the minute, 37 weeks pregnant, there is a lot of things I've had to drop out. Because I've started getting pelvic girdle pain. Some moving events I haven't been able to do for about 2 months. But just before I stopped those, I think I'd hit probably close to the heaviest yoke I've ever done, 250, 260, without a belt in the fastest time I've ever done. So that was definitely not affected. Stronger than ever on that. So I wouldn't say that you really lose strength through pregnancy. I think things are just a bit different. My squat for me, before pregnancy, I did a 1 rep max in a belt, which was 140. It wasn't my best. It wasn't like a new 1 rep max. I'd had a hip injury on and off for issues on and off for about 5 years. So the last time I actually properly maxed out, I hit a 160, which was in 2019. But since then, I've been nowhere near it just because my hips always flare up as I get anything above really 120, 130. And I've not been able to push my squat in absolute years. It's been the lift I really wanted to work on. But obviously, I had spent time working on my hip issues prior to pregnancy, so I'd done a good maybe 9 months of squatting before pregnancy with my hips absolutely fine. Obviously, to build it up slowly and be cautious. So I hit a 140 belted just before, it might have been very early pregnancy, like a couple of weeks before I found out I was pregnant, or just before. And now I've hit a 155 without a belt. Prior to that, I'd never gone above like 120 without a belt, so I'd say my squat has got a lot stronger. But obviously I had hit the 160 previously, so like the strength was kind of always there. I'd just not built back up to it. But definitely feels a lot stronger on that. And pressing, I'd had through pregnancy, I got a bit of a wrist injury which flared up a rotator cuff issue. I'm not sure if the wrist injury is due to like pregnancy hormones and relaxing, just making things a bit more flexible and not really being as careful with it. When I got like a bit of a niggle, I kind of just trained for it thinking it'd be fine because I've had it before, it usually is, and it wasn't the case. It did lead to a bit of an injury, so I was limited with pressing for a while, so I'm not being able to push that as much as I wanted to, but I'm still repping in the sort of 80 range. My previous best press, most of my work's around 90 to 100 kilos at like hitting maxes, so I'm pretty close to all of that. I've not done a max press or anything like that whilst being pregnant. It's something I did plan to do, but with the injury and rotator cuff, my focus is just being 100% healthy and injury free, especially for when I get back to competing. But yeah, overall, I'd say you don't lose strength. You're probably not going to be hitting your top numbers because you haven't got a belt on. Your positions will change. Like you might have to go wider in a squat with like the way that the baby sits and you bump. Some sessions, I found my work capacity definitely went down. I couldn't breathe very well for a lot of my training over the past month or two just because she was so high up. I felt like my lungs were just being absolutely crushed. Now she's dropped, it does feel more comfortable. I can breathe again, but because I've reduced the work that I've done and certain exercises I can't do, my work capacity has gone down quite a bit. So that is something I do need to build up, which will be my aim after I've had her. But I'd say general strength doesn't really go down. It doesn't drop. Like things just change. You're probably not hitting your top numbers, and you're probably not going to be maxing out during pregnancy. Obviously, I've done some beltless maxes. I felt safe too. I felt strong. It's all fine. She's fine. I'm fine. You do what feels right for you, and it felt right for me, and I'm happy with my progress overall. I think I'm probably am at my strongest I've ever been. The numbers might not be there, but I think with a few months of recovering from birth, getting my belt back on, training the way I used to train, get my work capacity back up there, I think I'll be surpassing all of my previous PBs. So it's been a very valuable off-season, if you want to call it that. I've been able to work on the things that I really needed to work on, which I kind of didn't have the time to do whilst competing just because it would mean taking a big step back, especially like with deadlift without a belt. Like I can't go to comp pulling a 120 making it feel like a max. But yeah, I've made great progress and everything, and I definitely do think that I am stronger than ever.